My name is Natalie Reynolds, 34 years old, and I never thought I'd be standing in the doorway of my own bedroom, watching my husband of 8 years tangled in our sheets with another woman. Just released early from gallbladder surgery, I stood frozen, my hospital bracelet still on my wrist. I left without a word, blocked our credit cards, and changed the locks. I thought my story ended there. I was wrong. Before I tell you how my world collapsed and then rebuilt itself in ways no one expected, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to follow my journey of rediscovery. I met Marcus at a marketing conference in Chicago 9 years ago. I was presenting a case study on digital advertising metrics, and he approached me afterward with thoughtful questions that quickly turned into drinks, then dinner, then a whirlwind romance that swept me off my feet. I was 34, established in my career as a marketing executive at a respected firm, and Marcus seemed like the perfect match, intelligent, ambitious, and attentive. We dated for just over a year before he proposed during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. The wedding was everything I'd dreamed of, intimate but elegant, with 60 of our closest friends and family at a vineyard overlooking rolling hills. We settled into a beautiful colonial-style home in an upscale suburb, complete with the wraparound porch I'd always wanted. From the outside, our life looked perfect. The first few years were good, maybe even great. We traveled to Portugal, Japan, and Argentina. We hosted dinner parties that our friends raved about for weeks. We talked about children, though we both agreed to wait until we felt more settled in our careers. Marcus was climbing the corporate ladder at his financial consulting firm, often working late and traveling for client meetings. I was being groomed for a senior position at my company, which came with its own demanding schedule. I suppose that's when things began to shift, though so subtly I barely noticed. The late nights became more frequent. The weekend trips together became solo business trips for him. Conversations over dinner grew shorter, then sporadic, then sometimes non-existent as he brought work home or stayed at the office until I was already asleep. "It's just a busy season," he would say. "This client is demanding," he would explain. "Once this deal closes, things will calm down," he promised. I believed him because I wanted to, and because my own career kept me distracted enough not to probe too deeply. Then came the other signs I ignored. His phone would go face down whenever I entered the room. He changed his email password and claimed it was a company security protocol. A new cologne appeared in our bathroom, one I hadn't selected for him. Weekend team-building retreats became more common, yet he shared fewer stories about his colleagues. Looking back, I should have recognized what was happening, but denial is a powerful force, especially when paired with exhaustion and the comfort of routine. Besides, I'd begun experiencing health issues of my own, persistent abdominal pain that I attributed to stress until my doctor diagnosed gallstones that would require surgery. Marcus seemed genuinely concerned when I received the diagnosis. He drove me to appointments, researched gallbladder-friendly recipes, and assured me he would take care of everything while I recovered. He even took 3 days off work to be with me after the surgery, scheduled for a Thursday morning. "I'll handle everything," he promised, kissing my forehead as the nurse prepared my for. "Just focus on getting better." The surgery went well, but recovery was more painful than anticipated. The doctor wanted to keep me under observation for an additional night, but by Friday afternoon, I was feeling better and growing restless in the hospital room. When the doctor made rounds and seemed pleased with my progress, I asked if I could go home a day early. "If your pain is managed and you promise to take it easy, I don't see why not," she said, though she seemed hesitant. "But you'll need someone at home to help you." "My husband will be there," I assured her, already reaching for my phone to surprise Marcus with the good news. Then I paused, finger hovering over his contact. What if I really surprised him? He wasn't expecting me until Saturday afternoon. I could catch an Uber home, let myself in quietly, and see the look of delighted surprise on his face when he realized I was home early. After the strain in our relationship, this unexpected moment might be just what we needed to reconnect. I didn't call. Instead, I signed the discharge papers, accepted my prescription for pain medication, and called a rideshare to take me home, imagining Marcus's face when he saw me walk through the door. I had no idea that the surprise would be entirely mine, or that my decision to come home early would change the course of my entire life. The Uber dropped me off just past 4 in the afternoon. Our house looked exactly as I'd left it the day before surgery. The blue hydrangeas I'd planted last spring blooming along the walkway, the brass door knocker gleaming in the afternoon sun. Everything normal, except for the unfamiliar silver BMW parked in our driveway next to Marcus's Audi. A client meeting, I thought. Marcus occasionally worked from home when meeting with important clients who preferred a more relaxed setting. I quietly unlocked the front door, not wanting to interrupt if he was in the middle of something important. The house was silent as I stepped inside, but immediately I noticed something out of place. A small burgundy purse on the entryway table, definitely not mine. I recognized it as the type sold by a high-end designer whose prices I always found ridiculous. Beside it lay a pair of women's sunglasses I'd never seen before. My chest tightened. Maybe his assistant had stopped by to drop off documents? But why would she leave her purse? I told myself there had to be a logical explanation as I moved further into the house, my post-surgery incision throbbing with each step. Then I heard it, laughter, muffled but distinct, coming from upstairs. A woman's laugh, followed by Marcus's low murmur. I stood frozen at the bottom of the staircase, suddenly understanding everything with crystal clarity, yet unable to fully process what was happening. My body moved on autopilot, each step up the stairs deliberate and silent. The master bedroom door was partially open. I didn't need to push it further to see the scene inside. Marcus and a woman with long dark hair tangled in our Egyptian cotton sheets, the ones I'd splurged on for our anniversary. Her red-bottomed heels lay scattered on the floor alongside his discarded tie. I recognized her instantly, Rebecca Johnson, a financial analyst who had joined Marcus's firm 2 years ago. I'd met her at the company Christmas party, where Marcus had introduced her as a talented new team member. Now I understood why her name had been appearing in our conversations more frequently. They didn't see me. I didn't make a sound. For several seconds, I just stood there, watching my marriage disintegrate before my eyes. I felt oddly detached, as if I were watching a scene in a movie rather than experiencing the implosion of my own life. My surgical incision burned as adrenaline coursed through my body. I should have screamed, should have thrown something, should have made my presence known in some dramatic way. Instead, I quietly backed away from the door, descended the stairs, picked up my purse where I'd set it down, and left our home as silently as I'd entered. Once in the driveway, I ordered another Uber and directed it to the Marriott Hotel 3 miles away. I checked in with mechanical efficiency, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears as I provided my credit card and ID to the receptionist. Only when the door to my hotel room closed behind me did the numbness begin to fade, replaced by waves of nausea that had nothing to do with my recent surgery. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my loose-fitting clothes from the hospital, and tried to breathe through the tightness in my chest. No tears came. Not yet. Instead, a strange, cold clarity settled over me. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint bank accounts and credit cards. With a few clicks, I transferred half of our savings into my personal account that Marcus couldn't access. Then I called each credit card company and reported the cards lost, requesting new ones be sent to my office address. Next, I called a 24-hour locksmith service and explained that I needed the locks changed on my home immediately, claiming I'd lost my keys and was concerned about security. I paid the emergency fee without hesitation. Only after these practical matters were handled did I call my best friend, Stephanie Lewis. "Nat? Aren't you supposed to be in the hospital?" she answered, confusion evident in her voice. "I was released early," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I need a favor. Can you meet the locksmith at my house in an hour? I've already paid over the phone. They just need someone to let them in." "Your house? Why are you changing the locks? Where are you? Where's Marcus?" The questions tumbled out rapidly. "I'm at the Marriott on Westbrook Avenue. Marcus is at home in our bed with Rebecca from his office." Silence followed, then a sharp intake of breath. Oh, Nat. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I'll be right there. No, I said firmly. I need you to meet the locksmith. Please, Steph. I can't. I can't go back there right now. She agreed, and I gave her the details for the locksmith appointment. After ending the call, I turned off my phone, knowing it would soon start ringing with calls from Marcus once he discovered what I'd done. That first night alone in the hotel room was surreal. I took my pain medication and lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying years of my marriage in my mind, searching for clues I'd missed, warnings I'd ignored. At some point, exhaustion overcame me, and I fell into a fitful sleep filled with dreams of falling from great heights. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and, for one blessed moment, forgot everything. Then reality crashed back, and with it came the tears I'd been unable to shed the previous day. They started slowly, then built into body-racking sobs that tore at my surgical incision. I cried until I had nothing left, then lay emptied and hollow, watching the digital clock change numbers. When I finally turned my phone back on around noon, it immediately began buzzing with notifications. 12 missed calls from Marcus. 23 text messages ranging from confused, "Where are you?" "Did something happen at the hospital?" to angry, "Why are the locks changed?" "Why are the cards not working?" to pleading, "Please talk to me." "Whatever you think you saw, we can work through this." I read each message without responding, then blocked his number. Stephanie had also called multiple times and left a voicemail confirming the locks had been changed and offering her guest room if I needed a place to stay. I texted her a brief thank you, but said I preferred the anonymity of the hotel for now. As the afternoon wore on, reality settled in. I was 34 years old, my 8-year marriage was over, and I had no idea what came next. But beneath the grief and shock, something else was forming, a steely resolve that would carry me through the storm that was about to break. By Monday morning, 3 days after discovering Marcus's betrayal, I had checked out of the hotel and gone directly to my office. I needed the comfort of routine, the distraction of work, and frankly, I needed to be somewhere Marcus couldn't easily make a scene. I'd emailed my boss over the weekend explaining that I'd had a personal emergency but was recovered enough from surgery to work. She seemed surprised to see me but didn't ask questions when she saw my expression. I made it through 2 client calls and was reviewing a campaign proposal when my assistant buzzed my office intercom. "Natalie, your husband is here. He seems upset. Should I send him in?" My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. "No, Tracy. Please tell him I'm in a meeting and cannot be disturbed." 20 minutes later, Tracy buzzed again, her voice tense. "He's still here and refusing to leave. Security is asking what they should do." I closed my eyes briefly. "Tell security to escort him out. If he resists, they should call the police." I watched through my office blinds as 2 security guards approached Marcus in the reception area. His normally impeccable appearance was disheveled, shirt wrinkled, hair uncombed. He was gesturing wildly, his voice rising enough that I could hear fragments through the glass. "My wife, need to speak, emergency." When the security guards took his arms, he yanked away and shouted, "Natalie, I know you can hear me. You can't just cut me off. We need to talk." Several colleagues poked their heads out of their offices, and I felt my face burn with humiliation. Finally, Marcus allowed himself to be led to the elevators, but not before pointing at my office and shouting, "This isn't over." My phone immediately lit up with a text from him, "You're being ridiculous. You can't just throw away 8 years without talking. I deserve a chance to explain." I didn't respond, but my hands shook as I placed my phone face down on my desk. Within an hour, the office grapevine was buzzing. I overheard whispers in the break room that fell silent when I entered. My assistant brought me coffee without asking and gave me a sympathetic look that made me want to scream. That evening, my phone began ringing with calls from mutual friends. First came Jeffrey and Diana Parker, couple friends who regularly joined us for dinner parties. Jeffrey's voice was cautious as he asked if everything was okay between Marcus and me. When I briefly explained what had happened, his response was telling. "Are you sure you're not overreacting? Marcus says there's been a misunderstanding. Maybe you should hear him out before doing anything drastic." I ended the call quickly, but similar conversations followed. Marcus was clearly reaching out to our social circle, spinning a narrative that painted me as unreasonable, unstable after my surgery, jumping to conclusions without giving him a chance to explain. Most disturbing was how readily some friends accepted his version. My parents called from Arizona, concern evident in my mother's voice. "Honey, Marcus called us. He's worried about you. He says you've blocked him out completely and won't even discuss what's bothering you." That doesn't sound like you. Did he mention that what's bothering me is finding him in our bed with another woman? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. A pause. He said you thought you saw something but were confused from your medication. Sweetheart, is it possible there's a misunderstanding? The fact that even my parents could entertain the idea that I had imagined the betrayal felt like a second betrayal. I ended the call promising to think things through, but the conversation left me feeling even more isolated. The next blow came when Rebecca herself reached out via LinkedIn with a message that began, "I know this is unorthodox, but I feel I need to explain what you saw." I deleted it without reading further and blocked her profile. The pressure to reconcile, to at least speak with Marcus, came from all directions. Friends suggested counseling, family urged forgiveness, even my dental hygienist offered unsolicited advice about working through rough patches. It seemed everyone had an opinion about a situation they understood only through Marcus's carefully constructed narrative. Meanwhile, Marcus escalated his efforts. When he discovered I'd transferred money from our joint accounts, he tried to reverse the transactions, only to be told by the bank that both account holders would need to approve such changes. He called my office so frequently that Tracy was instructed to block his number. He sent emails with subject lines that grew increasingly desperate. "Please read this," then "We need to talk now," and finally, "Legal action is my only option." That last email prompted me to consult with a divorce attorney. Elaine Bradford was a partner at a respected family law firm, known for her no-nonsense approach. During our initial consultation, she listened to my story without judgment, then outlined my options with clinical precision. "Given the circumstances, you have grounds for an at-fault divorce based on adultery," she explained. However, proving adultery can be messy and public. A no-fault filing might be cleaner. When I mentioned Marcus's threat of legal action, she seemed unconcerned. "For what? You're entitled to half of the marital assets. Your transfer was well within legal bounds as long as you didn't take more than your share. As for changing the locks, it's inadvisable but not illegal, especially if you felt unsafe returning to the home." With Elaine's guidance, I filed for divorce the following week. The papers were served to Marcus at his office, a detail I hadn't specified, but which Elaine assured me was standard procedure. Later, I learned from a former colleague who had connections at Marcus's firm that the public serving had created quite a stir, especially when Rebecca was seen rushing into his office immediately afterward and closing the door. Marcus's response to the divorce filing was to launch what could only be described as a smear campaign. Mutual friends reported that he was telling anyone who would listen that I had lost it after my surgery, that I was acting irrationally, possibly suffering from post-anesthesia psychosis. He claimed my paranoid delusions had led me to fabricate the affair scenario and take drastic actions without cause. Some friends believed him. Others seemed unsure what to think. A few, like Stephanie, stood firmly by my side, outraged on my behalf and unwavering in their support. "He's gaslighting you," Stephanie said during one of our coffee meetings. "And the worst part is he's got half our friends questioning your sanity." Through it all, I maintained my silence with Marcus. No calls, no texts, no direct communication of any kind. All contact went through Elaine, who handled his increasingly irate messages with professional detachment. My silence seemed to drive him mad, which Elaine assured me was actually working in my favor. "Keep documenting everything," she advised. "Every attempted contact, every incident like the one at your office, every report from friends about what he's saying. The more he escalates, the stronger our position becomes." So I documented. I created a detailed timeline of events starting from the day of discovery. I forwarded threatening emails to Elaine. I kept a log of every unwanted contact attempt. And through it all, I said nothing directly to the man who had been my husband, the man I had once believed would grow old with me. My silence spoke volumes, and it was the one thing Marcus couldn't seem to combat with his manipulative narratives and selective truths. In the escalating war between us, my most powerful weapon was my refusal to engage. 6 weeks after discovering Marcus's infidelity, I found myself sitting on the floor of my newly rented apartment, surrounded by unpacked boxes, unable to summon the energy to continue unpacking. The apartment was smaller than I needed, but in a building across town where Marcus was unlikely to find me. The beige walls and generic fixtures held none of the character of the home we'd shared, but anonymity was exactly what I wanted. I hadn't slept properly in days. Every time I closed my eyes, images of Marcus and Rebecca flooded my mind. Other nights, I dreamed of standing in empty rooms calling for someone who never answered. I'd wake gasping, tangled in sheets damp with sweat. Work, previously my sanctuary, had become challenging. I found myself reading the same emails multiple times, unable to absorb their content. During meetings, I would suddenly realize everyone was looking at me expectantly, waiting for a response to a question I hadn't registered. My boss, Catherine, had been understanding initially, but her patience was visibly wearing thin. Take some time, she finally suggested after I'd blanked during a presentation to a major client. Use your vacation days, sort out your personal situation, and come back when you can be fully present. Though phrased as a suggestion, the message was clear. I took a 3-week leave of absence, telling myself it was temporary, ignoring the whispers of doubt that suggested my professional reputation might be another casualty of my collapsed marriage. Alone in my apartment with nothing but time and turmoil, I reached a breaking point. Stephanie had been urging me to see a therapist, and in desperation, I finally made an appointment with Dr. Amanda Rivera, a psychologist specializing in trauma and relationship issues. Dr. Rivera's office was nothing like the cliched leather couch setup I'd imagined. It was bright and simply furnished, with plants in every corner and abstract art on the walls. Dr. Rivera herself was younger than I expected, with kind eyes and a direct manner that put me at ease despite my initial reluctance. "Tell me why you're here, Natalie," she said after introductions. I recounted the discovery of Marcus's affair and the aftermath, trying to maintain the detached tone I'd perfected over the past weeks. But as I spoke, unexpected tears began to fall, and once they started, I couldn't stop them. "I don't understand why I'm still so affected," I said, wiping my face with tissues she quietly provided. "I'm doing everything right. I've filed for divorce, I've cut contact, I'm moving forward. Why do I feel like I'm drowning?" "You've experienced a profound betrayal trauma," Dr. Rivera explained. "It's not just the infidelity itself, but the way it shatters your understanding of your reality. Everything you believed about your relationship, your past, even your identity as part of a couple, is suddenly called into question." Over the next few sessions, Dr. Rivera helped me understand that what I was experiencing went beyond normal grief. Marcus's behavior since the discovery, his attempts to make me doubt what I'd seen, his efforts to turn friends against me, his public portrayal of me as unstable, were classic gaslighting tactics. "He's trying to control the narrative," she explained. When someone is caught in a betrayal, sometimes they'll try to make the other person doubt their own perceptions rather than take responsibility. It's a form of emotional manipulation. We also explored patterns in our marriage that I hadn't recognized as problematic. Marcus's subtle criticism disguised as concern. His dismissal of my opinions on financial matters despite my own successful career. The way he would withdraw emotionally when he didn't get his way, leading me to work harder for his approval. These are signs of emotional manipulation that likely existed throughout your relationship, Dr. Rivera suggested. They may have been subtle enough that you didn't recognize them for what they were. This revelation was both illuminating and devastating. Not only was my marriage ending, but I was being forced to reevaluate its entire history. Had anything been real? Had Marcus ever truly loved me, or had I just been convenient, gullible, useful? During this period of intense self-examination, I experienced my lowest moments. There were nights I lay awake contemplating calling Marcus, not to reconcile, but simply to hear a familiar voice, to feel connected to someone who knew me, even if that connection had been built on shifting sand. One particularly low evening, I found myself with his contact pulled up on my phone, finger hovering over the call button. What stopped me wasn't pride or anger, but a text from Stephanie that arrived at that exact moment. Thinking of you. Remember, you're stronger than you know. That simple message broke the spell. I deleted Marcus's contact information and instead began writing in a journal Dr. Rivera had suggested I keep. I poured everything onto those pages: rage, grief, confusion, and eventually, small glimmers of hope. My physical health suffered during this period. The stress caused complications with my surgical recovery. At a follow-up appointment, my doctor noted elevated blood pressure and prescribed medication. Emotional stress has very real physical effects, she warned. You need to prioritize self-care right now. It was difficult advice to follow when simply getting out of bed each morning felt like an insurmountable challenge. But gradually, with Dr. Rivera's guidance, Stephanie's unwavering support, and my own stubborn determination, I established new routines. Morning walks in a nearby park. Evening tea rituals. Small, manageable tasks that gave structure to days that might otherwise have dissolved into formless grief. The rock-bottom moment came unexpectedly, not during a therapy session or late-night crying jag, but on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was standing in the cereal aisle of the grocery store, trying to decide between granola options, when I was overcome by the utter absurdity of my situation. Here I was, agonizing over breakfast cereal while my entire life had been upended. I abandoned my half-filled cart in the middle of the aisle and drove home in a daze. Sitting alone in my sparsely furnished apartment, I faced a stark choice: continue suffering or begin the genuine work of healing. Not just going through the motions, not just surviving day to day, but actively reclaiming my life, my sense of self, my future. I called Dr. Rivera and asked for an emergency session that evening. I'm ready, I told her when we met. I'm ready to stop being a victim of what happened and start rebuilding. I don't know how, but I need to try. She smiled, the first time I'd seen genuine pleasure rather than professional compassion on her face. That's the turning point I've been waiting for, Natalie. Now the real work can begin. I couldn't have known then that this decision, this commitment to healing rather than merely surviving, would prepare me for the even greater shock that was about to enter my life, a twist that would make Marcus's infidelity seem almost trivial by comparison. 3 months after leaving Marcus, just as I was establishing a new normal, a certified letter arrived at my office. The sender was a law firm I didn't recognize, Goldstein, Meyer and Associates. My first thought was that Marcus had hired new attorneys for our divorce proceedings, but when I opened the letter, I discovered something far more disturbing. Dear Ms. Reynolds, it began formally. This firm represents Westbrook Financial Partners in matters related to the ongoing federal investigation into financial irregularities within their corporate accounts. As your husband, Marcus Reynolds, held the position of senior financial consultant at Westbrook and listed you as co-signatory on several relevant accounts, we are reaching out to determine your knowledge of and involvement in these matters. The letter continued with legal jargon that made little sense to me, but phrases like wire fraud, securities violations, and potential criminal charges stood out like neon signs. I called Elaine immediately. What is this? I demanded when she came on the line. What investigation? What financial irregularities? This is the first I'm hearing of it, she said, her normally unflappable tone tinged with concern. Send me the letter right away. Don't respond to anyone until we've discussed this further. That evening, Elaine came to my apartment rather than having me come to her office, a gesture that underscored the seriousness of the situation. From what I can gather, she explained after reviewing the letter, Marcus is under federal investigation for financial crimes committed at his firm. The FBI believes he may have been moving client funds into unauthorized accounts, possibly offshore. But what does that have to do with me? I asked, my voice rising with panic. I had nothing to do with his work. You're listed as a co-signatory on some accounts, Elaine pointed out. That doesn't mean you're guilty of anything, but it does mean you'll need to cooperate fully with the investigation to establish your innocence. The following weeks were a blur of legal consultations and mounting anxiety. I hired a criminal defense attorney, James Morton, who specialized in white-collar crime, in addition to keeping a lane for the divorce proceedings. The costs were astronomical, draining the savings I'd managed to secure when I left Marcus, but I had no choice. The full scope of Marcus's deception became clearer with each new development. According to information James gathered, the FBI had been investigating Westbrook Financial for nearly a year before I discovered Marcus's affair. He was suspected of diverting client investments into shell companies, some of which listed both our names as beneficiaries, though I had never heard of these companies before. The timing of your separation from Marcus may actually work in your favor, James suggested during one of our meetings. It supports the narrative that you were in the dark about his activities. 2 weeks after receiving the initial letter, I was contacted directly by FBI Agent Carter, a stern-faced woman with prematurely gray hair and penetrating eyes. We met at James's office, where I answered questions for over 3 hours about my knowledge of Marcus's financial dealings, our personal finances, and any unusual activities I might have observed. Ms. Reynolds, Agent Carter said toward the end of the interview, based on our investigations so far, we believe your husband has been engaged in securities fraud for at least the past 3 years, possibly longer. The total amount misappropriated may exceed $10 million. The figure stunned me into silence. $10 million. The amount was incomprehensible. We've uncovered offshore accounts in both your names in the Cayman Islands and Singapore, she continued. Were you aware of these accounts? No, I whispered, feeling physically ill. I knew nothing about any offshore accounts. Agent Carter studied me for a long moment. Your financial records show that you transferred a significant sum from your joint accounts the day you discovered your husband's affair and subsequently froze your credit cards. Can you explain that decision? I explained my actions that day, the transfers, the credit card freezes, the lock changes, all done in the emotional aftermath of discovering Marcus's infidelity. It was just self-protection, I said. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just knew I needed to secure whatever I could before leaving. To my surprise, Agent Carter's expression softened slightly. That impulse may have saved you from much worse legal trouble, Ms. Reynolds. By separating your finances at that point, you created a clear delineation that helps us distinguish between potentially criminal activities and legitimate marital assets. As the investigation progressed, more shocking details emerged. Marcus had apparently been living a double life for years, not just in terms of his infidelity with Rebecca, but in his professional dealings as well. The respected financial consultant was allegedly at the center of an elaborate Ponzi scheme that had defrauded dozens of clients, including some of our personal friends. Most disturbing was the discovery that Rebecca wasn't just a romantic affair. She had been actively involved in the financial scheme, using her position to help Marcus falsify records and conceal transactions. The climax of this nightmare came when Marcus, who had been under surveillance, attempted to flee the country. He was arrested at O'Hare International Airport with a one-way ticket to a non-extradition country and over $200,000 in cash in his carry-on luggage. The arrest made local news, and suddenly the story was everywhere. Financial advisor arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme, blared the headlines. Some reports mentioned me as the estranged wife who filed for divorce months before the arrest, while others speculated about my potential involvement. My phone exploded with messages from friends, colleagues, and even distant acquaintances seeking gossip disguised as concern. The same people who had believed Marcus's portrayal of me as unstable now wanted the inside story on his criminal activities. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Most painful were the calls from mutual friends who had invested with Marcus based on our personal relationship. Jeffrey and Diana Parker had entrusted him with their retirement savings. Michael Sullivan, a college friend of Marcus's who had been in our wedding party, had convinced his parents to invest their life savings with Westbrook based on Marcus's personal assurance of above-market returns. Did you know? Was the question that haunted every conversation, spoken or unspoken. Were you part of it? The investigation continued for weeks, with regular interviews and document requests from various authorities. I provided everything asked of me: bank statements, tax returns, emails, text messages, anything that might help establish my ignorance of Marcus's crimes. In an unexpected development, Rebecca cooperated with authorities in exchange for reduced charges. According to James, who heard it from the prosecutor's office, she provided extensive evidence about Marcus's operations, including testimony that he had kept me deliberately in the dark about his financial dealings. He always said his wife was too naive about money to involve in the business side of things, she reportedly told investigators. He made sure she never saw the real numbers. The statement was simultaneously vindicating and humiliating. I had been completely deceived by the man I had shared my life with, and he had dismissed me as too naive to even be worth including in his criminal activities. 6 months after the initial letter arrived, Agent Carter called me personally to inform me that I had been officially cleared of any wrongdoing in the investigation. Based on all available evidence, we're satisfied that you had no knowledge of or participation in your husband's illegal activities, she said. The prosecutor's office will not be pursuing any charges against you. The relief was overwhelming, but it came with a bittersweet awareness that my reputation had been irrevocably tarnished simply by association. No matter the official finding, some people would always wonder if I had known, if I had benefited, if I had only left when I sensed the scheme was unraveling. What none of them knew was that Marcus's betrayal in our bedroom had been my unwitting salvation. Had I not come home early from the hospital that day, had I not caught him with Rebecca, had I not frozen our accounts and changed the locks in the emotional aftermath, I might have remained legally entangled in his crimes until it was too late to establish my innocence. The affair that had seemed like the end of my world had actually been the beginning of my freedom from a far more dangerous situation than I could have imagined. It was an irony too profound for even my therapist to fully untangle. 1 year after the day I stood in my bedroom doorway and watched my world collapse, I sat in a courtroom watching Marcus being sentenced for his financial crimes. He had accepted a plea deal, admitting to wire fraud, securities fraud, and tax evasion in exchange for a reduced sentence of 7 years in federal prison. I hadn't planned to attend the sentencing, but Agent Carter suggested my presence might help the judge understand the human impact of Marcus's crimes. "You're a victim too," she reminded me. "Your statement could matter." So I prepared a victim impact statement with Dr. Rivera's help, focusing not on the personal betrayal of his infidelity, but on the broader betrayal of trust that had affected so many people. Marcus looked nothing like the confident, polished man I had married. His designer suits had been replaced by a ill-fitting dark blue suit that hung loosely on his frame. His once perfect hair was unkempt, and deep lines had formed around his mouth and eyes. When our gazes met briefly across the courtroom, he quickly looked away, unable to hold my stare. When called to deliver my statement, I approached the podium with steady steps, drawing strength from the knowledge that I had survived the worst he could do to me. "Your Honor," I began, "I was married to Marcus Reynolds for 8 years. During that time, I believed I knew the man I had committed my life to. I was wrong. The Marcus Reynolds I thought I knew was a fiction, a carefully constructed facade hiding a person capable of profound deception." I spoke about the ripple effects of his crimes, not just on me, but on friends who had trusted him with their financial futures, on colleagues who had staked their professional reputations on his integrity, on family members who now had to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the criminal before the court. "The financial damage Marcus caused can be calculated in dollars and cents," I concluded. "But the damage to trust, to relationships, to people's sense of security in their own judgment, that cannot be quantified. Those wounds may never fully heal." As I returned to my seat, Marcus tried to catch my eye again, but I looked straight ahead. His crimes had long since ceased to be the center of my world, and I refused to allow him to reclaim that position, even for a moment. The divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier, with Marcus participating via video conference from the detention center where he awaited sentencing. The division of assets had been complicated by the ongoing criminal investigation and asset freezes, but with Elaine's help, I secured a settlement that acknowledged my innocence and right to retain certain properties and investments untainted by his criminal activities. The marital home, however, had been sold to help compensate some of Marcus's victims. I felt no regret watching it go to a young family who knew nothing of its history. The house had ceased to feel like home the moment I saw Marcus and Rebecca in our bed. Professionally, I had weathered the storm better than I'd initially feared. After my leave of absence, I returned to work with a new focus and determination. Rather than allowing Marcus's crimes to define me in my colleagues' eyes, I channeled my energy into a major campaign for a healthcare client that had been struggling to connect with their target demographic. My personal experience with betrayal and gaslighting had given me unexpected insight into the psychology of trust, and I completely redesigned the campaign to focus on transparency and authenticity. The campaign won an industry award, and Catherine, impressed by my resilience and fresh perspective, offered me a promotion to Senior Director of Strategic Marketing. Sometimes our greatest professional insights come from our personal challenges, she said when making the offer. You've brought a depth to your work that wasn't there before. The promotion came with a significant salary increase, which provided the financial security I needed to consider a bold move. For years, I had dreamed of living in Seattle, drawn to its creative energy and natural beauty, but had remained in Chicago for Marcus's career. Now, nothing was holding me back. I approached Catherine with a proposal. I would establish and lead a new Seattle office for the firm, tapping into the Pacific Northwest market that we had long discussed expanding into. To my delight, she embraced the idea, and plans were set in motion for the expansion. While preparing for the move, I reconnected with an old college friend, Diana Mitchell, who had established a successful boutique marketing agency specializing in sustainable businesses. Over dinner during a scouting trip to Seattle, she made an unexpected proposition. I've been thinking of expanding, but need someone with your corporate experience to help scale operations, she explained. What would you think about joining forces? You bring your corporate expertise, I bring my local connections and sustainability focus. We could create something special. The idea was both exciting and terrifying. Leaving the security of my corporate position for entrepreneurship felt risky, especially after the financial uncertainties of the past year. But the potential for building something that truly reflected my values was irresistible. After much deliberation and several detailed planning sessions with Diana, I decided to take the leap. I gave notice at my firm, explaining the opportunity to Catherine, who was disappointed but understanding. You've earned the right to build something of your own, she said. Just remember us when you're looking for strategic partnerships. The decision to start fresh professionally paralleled changes in my personal life as well. Through a hiking group I joined during one of my Seattle visits, I met James Thornton, an environmental lawyer with kind eyes and a quiet confidence that put me at ease. Our first date was awkward in all the charming ways new beginnings should be: spilled wine, misheard comments, nervous laughter. What made it different from any first date I'd had before was my new sense of self. I wasn't looking for someone to complete me or define me. I was already whole, already defined by my own strength and resilience. James and I took things slowly. I was transparent about my past, both the betrayal and the legal aftermath, and he listened without judgment. He shared his own story of a relationship that had ended when his partner decided she didn't want children, a life goal he wasn't willing to compromise on. We all have history, he said simply. What matters is what we learn from it and how we move forward. Moving forward became the theme of this phase of my life. Forward into a new city. Forward into entrepreneurship with Diana. Forward into a relationship based on honesty and mutual respect. Forward into a version of myself I never could have imagined during those dark days after discovering Marcus's betrayal. The work with Dr. Rivera continued, though our sessions became less frequent as I gained confidence in my healing process. You've done the hardest part, she told me during one of our video sessions after my move to Seattle. You've integrated the betrayal into your story without allowing it to become your whole story. That integration wasn't always easy. There were still nights when I woke from dreams of standing in that bedroom doorway. There were moments when a particular cologne or laugh would trigger memories I'd rather forget. But these instances became rarer, less intense, more manageable. What surprised me most about this transformation period was the discovery that happiness wasn't a destination I would suddenly arrive at, but rather moments strung together by purpose and connection. Happiness came in unexpected forms: the satisfaction of signing our first major client at the new agency, the peace of watching the sunset from my apartment overlooking Puget Sound, the warmth of James's hand in mine as we explored the city that was becoming home. 2 years after leaving Marcus, I barely recognized the woman I had been, not because I had changed completely, but because I now saw the strength that had always been there, waiting for circumstances that would call it forth. 3 years after the day I left my marriage without a word, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined during those first dark days. The marketing agency I founded with Diana, Mitchell Reynolds Strategic Partners, had grown to a team of 15 talented professionals specializing in authentic branding for sustainable businesses. Our client list included everything from local organic farms to international renewable energy companies. My personal healing journey had led me to an unexpected additional calling. After sharing parts of my story at a women's business conference, I was approached by a financial literacy nonprofit about developing a program to help women recognize and protect themselves from financial fraud, particularly in intimate relationships. What began as a single workshop evolved into a regular speaking engagement circuit where I shared red flags of financial abuse and manipulation, drawing from my experience with Marcus without centering him in my narrative. The workshops became so popular that we developed an online course, reaching thousands of women across the country. "You've turned your trauma into a tool for prevention," one participant wrote in a thank you email. "Because of your workshop, I recognized the warning signs in my own relationship before it was too late." Messages like these helped give meaning to the pain I had endured, though I was careful not to define myself solely as a survivor of betrayal. I was that, yes, but also a successful entrepreneur, a trusted friend, a daughter, a mentor, and now a partner in a healthy relationship. James and I had been together for nearly 2 years, taking our time to build a solid foundation before moving in together. His environmental law practice complemented my agency's focus on sustainability, and we often found professional synergies that strengthened our personal connection. "We're better together," he liked to say, "but complete individually." That completeness was something I had worked hard to achieve, refusing to use a new relationship as a bandage for old wounds. Instead, I had done the difficult internal work of rebuilding my sense of self and trust in my own judgment. On the legal front, all matters related to Marcus had finally been resolved. The divorce was long finalized, the criminal case closed with his incarceration, and the civil settlements with his victims completed to the extent possible with the recovered assets. I had purchased a small but beautiful craftsman home in a quiet Seattle neighborhood, using money from my portion of the marital asset settlement that had finally been released after the criminal proceedings concluded. The act of having my name alone on the mortgage papers had been surprisingly emotional, a concrete symbol of my independence and new beginning. Then came the day I had been both dreading and anticipating. Marcus was being released from the minimum security prison where he had served 5 years of his 7-year sentence, granted early release for good behavior and participation in rehabilitation programs. I learned of his release not from any official notification, but from a simple email that appeared in my inbox one Tuesday morning. "Natalie, I'm being released next week. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I've spent 5 years reflecting on the harm I caused. If you're willing, I would appreciate the opportunity to apologize in person. If not, I understand. Either way, I am truly sorry. Marcus." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling strangely detached. The name that had once been able to evoke intense emotion now felt like it belonged to a character in a story I'd read long ago. After consulting with Dr. Rivera, with whom I still had occasional check-in sessions, I decided to respond with clear boundaries. "Marcus, I acknowledge your apology and wish you well in rebuilding your life. However, I don't believe a meeting would be beneficial for either of us. My healing has come from moving forward, not revisiting the past. Please respect my decision by not contacting me again. Natalie." His response was brief. "I understand. Thank you for responding. I truly wish you happiness." And with that final exchange, the last thread connecting us was severed. There was no dramatic confrontation, no emotional reckoning, just the quiet closing of a chapter that had once seemed like it would define my entire story. In the following months, I occasionally heard updates about Marcus through mutual acquaintances. He had moved to Michigan to live with his older brother, had found work at a small accounting firm willing to hire someone with his record, and was apparently committed to making amends where possible. I wished him well from a distance, but felt no desire to reconnect or monitor his journey. My life had moved forward, and keeping tabs on his would only be a step backward. Some of our former friends reached out over time, offering apologies for believing Marcus's version of events or for distancing themselves during the scandal. I accepted these overtures with varying degrees of openness, depending on the relationship and the nature of their previous actions. Jeffrey and Diana Parker, who had lost significant retirement savings in Marcus's scheme, became surprisingly close friends again after an initially awkward reconciliation. "We were all victims of his deception in different ways," Diana said during our first dinner together in years. "It took us too long to realize that." While some old friendships were cautiously renewed, I had also built a new support network in Seattle, friends who knew my story but hadn't lived through it, who saw me as I was now rather than through the lens of past trauma. My relationship with my parents had deepened as well, after some difficult conversations about their initial skepticism of my account of Marcus's betrayal. "We failed you when you needed us most," my father acknowledged during a visit to my new home. "I hope you can forgive us for not trusting your judgment." That forgiveness came easily, as I had learned that healing rarely follows a linear path. People make mistakes, miss signals, trust the wrong people. I had done all of these things myself. The capacity to forgive, I discovered, was not about excusing harm, but about releasing its power to define your future. As I approached my 40th birthday, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past 6 years. The betrayal that had once seemed like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of a more authentic life. The painful unraveling of my marriage had ultimately freed me from a relationship built on deception. The public humiliation of Marcus's crimes had forced me to find strength I never knew I possessed. The lessons I learned could fill volumes, but the most profound were surprisingly simple. Trust your instincts. The little voice that whispers something is wrong is usually right, even when louder voices try to drown it out. Your worth is never determined by someone else's actions. Marcus's betrayal reflected his character, not my value. Silence can be more powerful than any words. My refusal to engage in Marcus's manipulation games ultimately revealed the truth more clearly than any argument could have. What seems like destruction can actually be clearing ground for new growth. The collapse of my old life created space for a better one to emerge. True strength isn't about never breaking, it's about how you gather the pieces afterward. These weren't just platitudes to me, they were hard-won truths carved from experience, lessons paid for with tears and sleepless nights and the disorienting pain of betrayal. The woman who had stood frozen in that bedroom doorway witnessing her husband's infidelity couldn't have imagined the life I now led, couldn't have foreseen the professional success, the meaningful relationships, the deep sense of purpose and self-trust that would eventually emerge from that devastating moment. That's the thing about life's most painful betrayals. They show you both the worst in others and the best in yourself, if you're brave enough to keep going, to keep believing that something better awaits on the other side of heartbreak. Have you ever experienced a moment when what seemed like the end actually became a beginning? Share your stories of unexpected turnarounds in the comments below. And if you found my journey meaningful, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of their story. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the most painful goodbye leads to the most beautiful hello.